For all the latest on the SaWGuy podcast, be sure to subscribe and don't forget that bell icon.
Hello, and welcome to the SaWGuy podcast.
Like scary movies? What's your favorite scary movie? Here's Johnny.
He'll tear your soul apart.
The boogeyman is real, and you found him.
Game over, man. Game over.
What do you want?
I want to hear you scream. Drop the prime time, bitch!
Welcome to the SaWGuy podcast. As always, y'all know I am the SaWGuy, and I hope you guys are enjoying your holiday festivities, all these Christmas horror films I'm bringing out to you. I know for sure as hell I'm enjoying mine. I brought you Misery first, right? American Psycho, and now you're joining me for the part 3 of this, right? It's episode 40 on Gremlins. And you know what's funny is that I grew up in the 80s. I know everybody who's in my generation, maybe even up there to the mid-90s, they could all tell you that, you know, this film became their holiday tradition film to watch because, you know, it's uncanny. There's this charm to it. It really is. You know, Gremlins was always my favorite because I remember hearing about it when I was a kid. It was actually released in, 1984 and June 8th. And what's funny, they released it in June, not in December, in June. And it competed against another blockbuster film, not my favorite, by the way, Ghostbusters. And, you know, at the time when the film came out, everyone's like, oh, it's not going to do too well. But once it got to Christmas, you know, then that's when it became like this big cultural icon and it became everywhere, you know. And there's just so much charm to it. There really is. And it built up the careers of like a few people who are still working today because of this film, because it was a great fucking film. It was just, there isn't anything in this film that you can't like, right? So if you haven't seen Gremlins, which I know probably 99.9% of you have, but, you know, I recently came across people who's like, you know, I've never heard of Gremlins, and I'm like, what is wrong with you? Like, what? You're my age, you should know about Gremlins, right? But, you know, so I'm going to explain it like I do in every episode. You know, I'll break down the film and everything, throw in a little bit of tidbits. But before I get started, I noticed some of you guys, I saw some of the comments, I saw some of the messages. Everyone's like, bring back Misery the Pig! So, by popular demand, I brought back my Misery Pig. Yeah, I know, all decked out for the holidays, just like me. And then also, too, some of you guys on the audio version, you probably won't be able to see it for obvious reasons. But I'm wearing a different style mask because I actually did a speed painting video. It was kind of interesting. Everyone's been asking me about my mask to do a speed painting video, paint a new one. So I painted a new one, and I wanted to rock it today so that way you all see it. If you haven't seen the speed painting video, I'll post a link on it, or I'll tag it at the end of the video so that way you all can check it out, because I impressed myself on it. But anyways, let's get started with Gremlins. And with Gremlins, what's funny about this film, it starts off all innocent-like and everything. It talks about this guy. His name is Ryan Peltzer, right? And he says, you know, right in the first dialogue, let me introduce you to myself, friends. My name's Ryan Peltzer. And I got a story to tell you about my Christmas. And then he basically goes on and says, you know, everybody, they have their own Christmas issues and craziness. But he says, well, this one takes the cake. And it shows him following this kid. And he follows him into, like, this subway station. And this kid's like, oh, yeah, my grandpa's store is down here. And he's like, what? Like, why down there? You know, because it's old-time Chinatown. And it's kind of, I guess you could say it's not run down, but, like, really kind of gritty. So he goes in there. And the reason why he's going to go talk to this guy is because he's an inventor. You know, Rand Peltzer's an inventor. He invents the stuff that you see, like, on the QVC, the Home Shopping Network, you know, all those infomercial shit, right? So he goes in there, he sees all these nice, intricate things. He starts talking to the grandpa, and he tells him about his bathroom buddy. And I love it because it's like this big-ass thing, right? And he's like, well, you know, whatever happens, you know, if you're traveling, you're all thinking, oh, man, I forgot to do this, I forgot to do that. No worries. I got your toothbrush, I got your razor, I got your toenail clippers. And, you know, what happens if you have a bad case of dragon's breath? Well, right here, you pop out this toothbrush, and then, you know, he starts squirting out the toothpaste, it squirts all over on him. And then he starts hearing this noise, right? He goes up to this box that's shaking, and it starts singing, right? And he's asking about it, like, what is this about? You know, what the hell is this? They're all like, oh, it's a mogwai. Well, what's a mogwai? They're all like, oh, it's just a little happy creature, you know? And then once he looked at it, he thought to himself within 2 seconds, right? This would be a perfect present for my kid. And I laugh at it because I don't think there's too many people, you know, parents alike. I mean, some of you parents out there, let me know in the comments below. You know, who's going to see a box rattling and it's like, oh, I think that'd be perfect for my kid, you know? And it's just, there was no dialogue. Like, there was nothing. He just saw it and was like, I gotta have it. I gotta have it. So he tells the grandpa, hey, let me buy this for you. I'll give you $100 right now. And he's like, it's not for sale. He walks off and the kid, you know, was telling him, hey, my grandpa's crazy. We need the money. So I'll meet you outside in the back and I'll sell it to you. So as he sells it to him, it shows, you know, the scene where he's like holding the box and everything all wrapped up. And he's walking. And the kid's dialogue is telling him, like, hey, there's 3 rules you got to follow with mogwai, okay? 1, you got to keep them away from bright light. That can kill them. They don't like bright lights. 2, you can't feed them no matter how many times they cry. Don't feed them after midnight. And 3, never, ever, ever get them wet, right? So it shows that whole scene. And then it... what I thought was pretty cool is that then it shows like the whole town like all covered in snow and everything. Gets you this weird... Not weird, but... For me, it's weird because, you know, when you look at the town is actually the same town as Hill Valley. And if you guys know what Hill Valley is, it's from Back to the Future. It's the whole same town. Everything. Like, you see the clock tower, you see, like, the main shops and everything. And that's why I say it's weird, because I'm like, whoa, okay, that's Hill Valley. That's not Kingston Falls where they're at. And it shows a bunch of signs. And the signs are kind of like, I guess you could say, not a ripoff, but a wink to, like, Steven Spielberg's films, you know, for Indiana Jones. And what's crazy is that Spielberg, he worked on this film, and this film was actually meant to be a sequel to E.T., which is funny. And it turned into this because, you know, the studio didn't want it, and, you know, he got with the writer Chris Columbus, and he said, okay, since you're working on a film about little green monsters, I want to do something with little green monsters. Let's come together and make this film. So then they made Gremlins happen, right? But this whole film... I'll explain later. You know, there's a lot of little winks here and there to Spielberg, you know, and the town is one of them, you know, because it's the same thing as Hill Valley. But anyways, it shows a whole town. Then it shows that this kid, his name's Billy, he's trying to start up his car. He has I guess you could say those old school VW bugs. And then he meets this guy, his neighbor, and his name is Murray. And he's one of those, you know, old school, hardcore, like, you know, hardworking American kind of guys, right? He comes out there and he's like, hey, Billy, you know, how you been? And he's like, oh, okay, I'm doing good, you know, and I think his last name was, God, I can't remember his name. I think it was Futterman was his last name, right? But anyways, he's telling him, oh, you know, Mr. Futterman, it's okay, I'm running late, and, you know, he has his dog with him. His dog's name was Barney. Then he's like, well, what's wrong with your car? He's like, you know, that happened. It just happens. Then he's like, I can't wait to see your comments in the newspaper. And I guess the kid, Billy, he's like this artist, right? He likes to draw. And he's like, yeah, the newspaper doesn't print them out, but... I'll talk to you later. I'm running late for work. So he ends up walking to work because it's a small town, right? And then Murray, it's funny because, you know, the whole time he's like telling him, you got this foreign piece of crap car. You need to go get a real American-made machine. And as he leaves, he's looking at the car and he's like, damn foreign cars. You know, and it's funny too because I know a lot of people back in the day and still now that still do that shit, you know? But anyways, it shows how he goes to work and everything. And once he goes to work, it shows that he's... I guess you could say, you can kind of base the age, he's between like 21 to 23, right? You know, he's this young kid, he has a lot of imagination, big dreams of being a drawer and an artist, and then he goes and works at a bank. And then you find out like different things about people. You know, you see this old lady, you know, who's walking, she's carrying this fucking, this snowman's head, and you could hear her like heels hitting the ground. That's how you know that's how you know they're pissed if they're walking and their fucking shoes make sound. And then, you know, she goes up, this other lady talking to the old lady, and her name was Mrs. Deagle, the old lady. And so she's like, hey, I just lost my job, my husband lost his job, and, you know, we're trying to make ends meet, and she's like, well, what do you want? And she's like, well, can you give us an extension so we could pay it? She's like, well, I'm in business with the bank, and me and the bank want to make money. They're all like, well, it's Christmas. This is what's fucked up. She goes back up to this lady with her kids, and she's like, well, you know what you can ask Santa for? And I was like, whoa, what the fuck? That was dark, right? And so she walks into the bank with this fucking, you know, snowman head. And, you know, the kids are walking away with the mom, and they're all like, I'm hungry. And then she tells the kids, I know, me too. I was like, what the fuck? Like, that's crazy. They based that character more like a Scrooge, you know, from the vibe that I got. I don't know if it's true, if they were trying to do like an Ebenezer Scrooge character, you know, for this film. But I know for a fact that, like, that's the vibe that I got. Like, oh, okay, so she's supposed to be the Scrooge in this film. She comes in, she literally cuts in front of everybody, you know, because she basically owns the bank. You know, she owns the fucking town. She's a rich old lady, right? So she's telling, you know, Billy, like, hey, there's an issue here. Your dog, your mangy mutt, he, you know, broke my Bavarian snowman. And, you know, he's like, well, I'm sorry. I mean, is there anything I could do to pay for it? You know, and then she's like, I don't want your money, but I want that dog. I'm going to take him to the kennel, to the pound. And this whole time as she's saying this, the fucking dog's under there, right? The dog jumps out, and then she starts acting and panicking like, oh, my heart can't take it. Oh, you know, so the bank manager comes out, and, you know, the other bank assistant manager comes out. What I thought was funny, too, about this film, you had 2 stars from Fast Times at Ridgemont High in this film. You had Phoebe Cates, who played Katie, you know, the girl, his love interest. And then you had the other guy who played, what's his name? His name's, he played Gerald in this film. His name's Judge Reynolds. Judge Reynolds, that's what it was. Everybody knows him as the guy who was in the bathroom thinking of Phoebe Cates when she was taking off the top and everything. I find it funny that both of those characters are in this film. And he plays, like, the bank assistant manager. And, you know, they're arguing with Billy, like, why the hell you have the dog here? And, you know, he's telling them, well, you know, I just wanted to make sure my dog was okay and everything. And, you know, they basically, like, chewed his ass out and everything. And then in the corner you see Phoebe Cates, like, why is he getting chewed out, you know? Then later on it shows that he's, you know, the end of the day, he's already at the bar and he's drawn out. And, you know, he's talking to one of the other locals. And they're all like, yeah, you got Mrs. Deagle, perfect, right there. There's a fucking picture of a dragon with her fucking face on it or something, or a lizard. And then, you know, here, Gerald, the bank assistant manager, the guy from Fast Times at Ridgemont High, he comes in. He's like, guess who almost got to the unemployment line today? Like, he was fucking with him, you know? He was like, I don't know, guess who? You know, and they had this little dialogue where he was, like, fucking with him, like, saying, hey, you need to get your shit together because, like, you know, you almost got fired today. And, you know, you need to shape up because, you know, they kind of implied that, you know, Billy, his mom, and his dad, they all don't work except Billy. And Billy's making enough money to provide for his family. And he's doing this at a young age of 21, which is like, what the fuck, right? So it builds up all that dialogue with it. And as they're sitting there talking at the bar, then, you know, I was going to say Phoebe Cates. No, Katie, that's her name in this movie. Katie comes up and asks, like, hey, what type of drink do you want? And then he's like, oh, I'm fine. And then, you know, you see Jer, well, he gets pissed when you call him Jer. But Gerald, he was saying, well, I'll take a, he goes, I'll take a vodka martini, shaken, not stirred. And I thought, oh shit, that was a James Bond reference. Which is, I know, I'm a nerd. I see all this shit watching the film like so many times, right? And so he's telling her, hey, you know, why are you working here? You know, it's like you're working here for free. And she's like, yeah, but I'm helping him out. And then he's like, you want to come check out my new apartment? And, you know, she came back super quick. She's like, I don't want to see your old apartment. And then she walks off, and I was like, damn, right? So later on it shows it's the end of the day. He goes home. Then his dad finally comes home, and he's singing. And then he starts talking to his mom about everything. Then his dad says, hey, I got you a present. And then he's like, oh, what is it, a dog? And he's like, well, it's a new car. You know, he's mom and pa kind of thing, joke, right? He goes and sits there, and he tells her, tells the mom, hey, dim down the lights. They dim down the lights. They pull it out, and it ends up being Gizmo, the Mogwai, right? He pulls it out, and then he's like, what's this? He's like, oh, it's a Mogwai. And he's like, Mogwai? He's like, I've never seen any of these before, right? Then he's like, well, does he have a name? He's like, well, I don't know. I mean, I was calling him Gizmo, and that's what he started liking it. So that's where the name Gizmo comes in. And the name, well, not the name Gizmo, but Gizmo, his voice acting is actually done by Howie Mandel. And most people know Howie Mandel now because of Deal or No Deal and all that. But before he became, like, anything big, like, this was his 3rd movie that he ever did, and he only did the voices for it. And because of this film, it built up his career, right? Which is pretty interesting. Like, it blew me away, like, what? Howie Mandel did the voice of Gizmo? What? You know, and you can see it later on in his other work that he's done, you know, with, like, his cartoon show, Bobby's World and everything. We all know Bobby's World if you're in my generation, right? But anyways, you know, the mom's all excited. She takes a picture, and he's like, whoa, 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 hold on. You know, because they see Gizmo acting all up. He's like, he doesn't like bright light. Now, there's 3 rules you got to follow. Never feed him after midnight. And whatever you do, don't get them wet. Don't even let them take a bath, you know. And then 3, make sure you, you know, keep them out of light. Keep it low light, right? So it shows that he's all excited with this SaWGuY with Gizmo. And he starts to, you know, play on a piano. And then he starts to see Gizmo singing and everything. And what I thought was pretty interesting, too, is that you have Corey Feldman in this film. He doesn't play in this film much, like more than 5 minutes. But it shows, like, in the beginning, he's helping his dad selling Christmas trees and all that stuff. And what was funny is that, you know, I guess he had an off day at the bank. And, you know, he was there, you know, like the next day, he, what's the kid's name? His name's Pete. That was Corey Feldman's character. He comes in, and, he, you know, he's delivering the tree. You know, it's a small town. That's pretty cool that they deliver trees. Shit, they don't do that now. But anyways, he delivered the tree, and, you know, he went to go talk to Billy, and then he's like, what's that sound up there? So he takes him up to his room and shows him the SaWGuY and everything. He's like, SaWGuY? And it shows, like, different scenes where you see Gizmo, like, hi! And he's, like, watching TV shows and shit, just, like, trying to stay warm. And they fucked up because it shows that Billy was painting. He had this cup of water, and Pete knocked it down. So it's Corey Feldman's fault that, you know, the Gremlins all multiplied, right? So they pour the water on the SaWGuY. He starts to go crazy, and then all of a sudden, like, different things start coming out. Then they see that they all grow up rapidly, and they're all like Gizmo, right? Then he goes and talks to his dad and says, hey, we got an issue here about the water situation. And he says, well, the SaWGuY, they start, you know, multiplying when you get water on it, right? Because they don't know anything about it. And they're all like, they're all different from Gizmo, and the one that's leading is this one right here with the big old stripe on his head. They try to touch him, and he's like trying to bite their finger and shit. And then it shows that Gizmo's doing his own thing, playing the trumpet, and then they're all playing, you know, games, being all stupid. So out of that whole aspect of it, you know, then they start to kind of worry, and then he, you know, he takes one of them to the shit. Where is it? He takes it to the school. I was gonna say to the scientist to the school because the town's so small that their local scientist he teaches at a high school. So he takes him over there, and his name was Mr. Henson. He's like, hey, I have this SaWGuY here. And I don't know anything about this creature. Could you tell me about it? And then he tells him, like, this is how they multiply. And he puts a drop of water on him. And then that SaWGuY multiplies into 2. And then he's like, well, can I keep one for test reasons? And then he's like, yeah, okay. So it shows later on that Billy, he goes back home with the SaWGuY, and then he's walking around town. And then at that same time, you know, the scientist, Mr. Henson, you know, he's doing a blood test and everything. And then it's like 3 in the morning, and he's like, all right, it's been a long day. I'll see you tomorrow. And what was crazy is that he saw on the clock in the background that it was like 3, 4 in the morning. He left his fucking sandwich there. He left his sandwich. And all of a sudden, you see this SaWGuY like smiling all big, like, ooh, and pulls it down and eats it, right? As that scene happened, then you see Billy, and Billy walks by, you know, the bar where Kate, well, not lives, but Kate works. And, you know, he sees Mr. Murray, you know, like all drunk and everything, and then she's like, okay, it's closing shop time, and then he gets in his tractor, and then, you know, not his tractor, his bulldozer or something, and then, you know, she's telling him, well, maybe you should walk. He's like, yeah, I'll go walk. So, you know, she basically talked to him to not drink and drive, which was a cool thing, right? They're walking, and then she's talking about how she don't like Christmas, and he's like, well, why? She's like, well, it's the most depressing time of the year and everything, and he's like, well, you know, I thought everyone's happy. And then she's like, you need to get over it because while people are opening presents, you know, the sad people are opening up their wrists. And I was just like, what the fuck? This dialogue is crazy. It's like dark as shit. All right, I like this. Then, you know, he finally walks her home. He asks her on a date, and she says, okay. And then he's all excited. He goes, okay, well, we'll talk about it over the phone, right? So he goes back, and then all of a sudden, you know, when he's back at home, he sees all the SaWGuYs in, like, the suitcase, like, going crazy. And he's like, all right, I guess you guys are hungry, so I'll get you some chicken, right? So he goes and gets, you know, chicken out of the kitchen and everything, and he feeds it to him. Because he saw that his clock said that it was, you know, like 11:35. It wasn't midnight yet. So he feeds him, right? And then all of a sudden he goes to sleep and then wakes up. And then all of a sudden he sees that they're all, like, in cocoons and everything. And then he tells his mom, like, hey, I don't know what the hell happened. I fed him. It was before midnight. Like, hold on. You know, then he looks at his clock and the fucking wires are chewed out. So the Gremlins, they played him for a fool so they can, you know, change, right? Because with the water, they multiply, right? With the food after midnight, then they turn into the green monsters. And they don't explain that, like, per se. You have to watch the whole film to see it, right? So as that happened with them, the one at the, you know, science lab, that one changed too. And then all of a sudden he goes to work, has to deal with Mrs. Deagle again, you know, being stupid about asking for his dog. And then, you know, that's when the scientist calls him and says, hey, they hatched, you know. So, you know, he calls up, he doesn't call up. He's like, oh shit. He gives the phone to Kate. Kate's like, okay. He runs to the science lab, and after it already hatched, he already excused all the kids out of the class and everything, including Corey Feldman, who was in his class, you know, talking to Pete. So he kicked them out. And then, you know, he sees this, the Mogwai, and he's like, hey, I got something here for you. It was the old school fucking Snickers bar. So he starts giving him the Snickers, and he's like, you're not still mad about that little blood test there, you know? I just want to see how you look, you know? And then he hears that it's under the desk. So he goes and gives it, you know, underneath the desk. Pulls his fucking hand and, like, I guess eats his hand or something. And then when Billy comes in, Billy sees that he has a shot in his ass. And I guess it was poison or something that killed him, right? And then he was like, what the hell? Like, you know, he's looking around. And then he sees, you know, the gremlin was, like, going crazy. And the gremlin, I thought it was funny because in the 80s, the dialogue for these characters is, there was a word they throw it around a lot in the 80s called caca, which means like shit. They couldn't say shit, so they said caca. And they said it in every fucking 80s film. So it showed, you know, this gremlin hand comes out, grabs this apple, yum, yum, and then he eats it, patooey, caca. I start fucking laughing at that every goddamn time because it's just so funny how they say it, right? Then all of a sudden, you know, he's chasing this gremlin around the school. He breaks through the air vent, and then, you know, after he gets cut and everything from trying to catch it, he goes to the nurse's office, tries to wrap up his hand. And all of a sudden, the gremlin comes out and starts attacking him, and then runs out, right? And then, as that's going on, he tries to call his mom and says, hey, be careful, they all hatched. They're all, and then you see, like, the gremlins, after they already hatched, you know, Gizmo, he's already like, because Gizmo knows what's going on. They all hatched, and, you know, one of them saw the phone line, caca, ripped it out. So that's when he starts running home. Then they start fucking with the mom by playing the Christmas music. Do you see what I see? You know, and it was a wink, right? So she goes down there, she turns off the record. Behind, you can see all the footprints of all the fucking gremlins, which I thought was funny. And then she goes into the corner and she sees one eating the gingerbread man. And he's like, yum, yum. And he's eating him, right? And all of a sudden, you know, she knocks him into the mixer or the blender or whatever, turns it on, so she kills that gremlin, right? Then all of a sudden, this other gremlin's like right there laughing at her, throwing dishes. And I started laughing because I'm like, you know, there's always that one person during the holidays that doesn't want to fucking do dishes. And seeing that scene, you know, just makes me think of that. So he's throwing the dishes. She gets one of those TV dinners, those TV trays that you put for like the couch and shit to watch TV and eat. So she's holding that as a shield. And she grabs a fucking knife, and then all of a sudden, you know, he's throwing it, and then all of a sudden she got the knife, and it was like right there, and all of a sudden you see this girl go, ah! She fucking stabbed the shit out of it! It was like, what the fuck? And then all of a sudden another one throws like a whole pan of cookies at her back. She turns around, and it's laughing. So she gets, I thought this was fucking weird. She has like roach killer, like right next to the stove, out of all things. So she picks it up and she fucking is spraying the shit out of this gremlin, puts him in the microwave, turns it on, and it fucking blows up, like blood and guts everywhere. And I laugh at it because it's the fact that, like, you know, in the 80s, you can get away with that. And that was considered family-oriented, which was crazy, right? So anyways, after that happened, then all of a sudden she starts hearing this rustling in the tree. And then, you know, Billy's mom, she was just like, you know, this is fucked up, like they're messing with my Christmas, right? We all have family members that are like that. So she goes in there and she starts seeing the stocking move. She knocks down the stocking and it ends up being a toy that's moving around. And then all of a sudden you see these red eyes like light up right behind her in the Christmas tree. And the Christmas tree's attacking her. And then, you know, the gremlin's attacking her and everything. Billy walks in, grabs his dad's sword that's on display, cuts its head off, and then you see it like fall right into the fucking fireplace like dying. So they basically kill off all the gremlins, right? Except two of them. The one that got away from the science lab and Stripe. So then they see Stripe, and they're like, holy shit, that's Stripe. And before they could do anything, he breaks out the window and runs out. And then before he can go chase after Stripe, he goes and takes his mom to the next door neighbor, not to the Futtermans, you know, not to Murray and his wife, Sheila, but, you know, the next door other neighbors. And then he goes back in the house and he hears Gizmo. So he puts Gizmo in his bag, right? And once he gets Gizmo in his bag, he starts trying to go and look for them. And then this is at the point where, you know, he follows Stripe into the YMCA. Stripe, you know, swipes him in the chest. And all of a sudden he jumps into this fucking big-ass, like, swimming Olympic pool. Once he jumps in, all of a sudden you hear the like a cat sound, right? And then the water is all bubbling and everything. And Gizmo's like, uh-oh. And because you know what happens? They all multiply, right? So once they all started multiplying, that's when he was like, oh, fuck. He goes to the sheriff and tries to tell the sheriff all the story, and the sheriff thinks he's drunk. Then the sheriff is like, fuck, we're getting all these calls about these little green monsters. And, the deputy was like, oh, well, let me drive. Well, you're drunk. Well, how come? Because I'm the sheriff, asshole. And they actually said that in the movie. I was like, they said asshole, like, whoa. This movie, I was surprised at how much they got away with that PG rating. Like, really, it's shocking to me, right? Then all of a sudden it shows, like, all the gremlins, they all come out, like, Stripe leading. He's, like, turns around in the dark and, like, tell them, come on. So then they start causing a fucking ruckus with everybody. They start fucking with people. First thing they went to, where is it? They went to Murray's house, the next door neighbor. And they got into, on his antenna. And he's just sitting there watching TV. And he's like, damn TV, I should have bought a Zenith. And it's a wink to that because Zenith was the last TV brand that was, like, actually made in America, right? So he's like, well, it must be the antenna or something. He gets his jacket on, goes out there, tries to look at his antenna. Then his fucking tractor or his bulldozer turns on, and then it's chasing him. And what was funny about it, the whole time he was talking about Gremlins. Like, oh yeah, Gremlins, they came out in World War II. They always would mess with the aircraft and everything. And I guess they imply that he fought in World War II, which I thought was a pretty cool wink, because that's how Gremlins actually started, like the whole, like, idea of it. But I'll get into that in a sec. So anyways, he runs into the house, tells his wife, and all of a sudden the bulldozer comes in. Then he's like, that's a gremlin! That's a gremlin in there! I knew it! Then his wife is like slapping him, you're crazy! You're crazy! And then they're like, ah! The gremlins are laughing. And it's implied that they killed him. But you'll find out at the end of this episode. I'll tell you what happened with that. Then it shows how Stripe goes in and he sees Mrs. Deagle sign. And I thought it was funny. He looks at it, Deagle, 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 Deagle. So, they see Mrs. Deagle. She sits on this chair, rides down on this fucking stairs. And, they imply that she's old and she just, she's fucking lazy, right? And she has all these cats. And then all these cats are all named after currency, like, oh, come on down, dollar bill. And then she keeps hearing noises. So she's like, what the fuck? So she gets water and she hears, like, these carolers. She opens it up, and before she could throw the water, she was like, what the fuck? She sees all the gremlins. They're all caroling and stuff, being stupid. And then Stripe was in there messing with her chair. And then all of a sudden she gets in the chair. I'm too old for this. I can't go like this. No. So she turns on her electronic chair to go up the stairs, and it fucking goes haywire. Goes super fast. She flies out through the window and then crashes down. Then that's when you see the sheriff, and then they roll up. They're all like, that was just Mrs. Deagle that just came out. Then they see a guy dressed in Santa Claus, and all these fucking gremlins are attacking him. And then, he's looking at the gremlins, and I guess the sheriff was drunk too, because he's looking at the gremlins, and he's just like waving at him. Which I thought was kind of fucking funny. At the same time, you see another gremlin underneath the car, rips out the fucking brake line. And then all of a sudden, the sheriff, and then they try to leave, and then because they couldn't hit the brakes, their fucking car flipped, and there they go, right? Then it shows that most of the other gremlins, they all went to, the bar, the main local pub that everyone goes to. And you see Kate working there, and she's like trying to, I guess she's stuck. Because I was thinking, why the fuck is she staying there, right? She's stuck, and she's lighting all these cigarettes for all these, different gremlins. You see one of them doing flash dance. Another one comes out. And I fucking die at this one. He's wearing his sunglasses that he flashes like, ah. I mean, it was fucking funny. It was corny and canny. Then they show this one that was depressed drinking Jack Daniels. And then, another one of them comes out. Deagle, 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 Deagle. It was doing like the puppeteering and shit. And then finally she realized, she tried to light one of their cigarettes for another one. And she realized, oh, they don't like light. So she gets the Polaroid camera and starts flashing at them, right? And then some of them start dying from the flash. And then that's when Billy rolls up. And then all of a sudden, she breaks away after this one. And she flashes where he tries to shoot her. And Stripe, he got his ass out of there. They get in the car, and then they try to get away. And basically what they did, they run into, I guess it was the bank where they work at. And that's when the film kind of changed. Like, she told this whole story about why she hates Christmas, about how her dad tried to dress up as Santa Claus. And he came down the chimney, got stuck. And he broke his neck, when he got stuck. And they didn't know that he was dead until, like, a week later when they pulled him out of the chimney. So that it got real dark at that. Like, what the fuck, And after that whole scene had went down, then they basically, you start seeing the gremlins. They all kind of gathered up, and they went to the local movie theater, which is the same movie theater that Marty McFly fucking blows up in Back to the Future. And they're watching, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, which I thought was crazy. Like, holy shit, you could never get Disney to, like, play any of their movies within a movie, especially like this. But they got away with it. Steven Spielberg, he pulled some strings. And, it shows that they're all in the movie theater and everything. And then they sneak in. And then they turn on all the gas lines. And, all of them were all in there except Stripe. Stripe was looking for candy. He was watching the film and he's like, fuck this. So he wanted to go get candy. So he sees that they're all out. So he looks across the street at the Montgomery wards. He sees the candy. He's like, yum, yum. So he leaves. Breaks in the window, tries to get the candy. They run out. And as they run out, the Gremlins start seeing them because the film stops. And then they get out. And then all of a sudden, boom! The movie theater blows up with all of them in there, right? Except Stripe. They see Stripe right there. And then they're all like, we got them all. They're all like, oh shit, it's Stripe. So they go in and they try to chase after Stripe. And what I thought is funny, they go into a fucking Montgomery wards. Montgomery wards back in the 80s, it was basically like, I guess you could say you can compare them to Target. They were upscale, they weren't like Walmart, and they had everything. Everything except groceries, right? And that's what Target used to be until like a few years ago, right? And so anyways, they go into this store, and that's when Kate's like, okay, I'm going to go and try to break in and turn on all the lights and everything. And so that's what she's trying to do. Then, as he's going through, Stripe is watching Billy, right? And then all of a sudden he takes out Billy and starts fucking with him, knocks him down. Billy grabs a baseball bat. And then that's when Stripe comes in with the yellow chainsaw. And I thought it was funny because it was electric. And I know I made a post on this on my Facebook page. I was like, shit's getting real when they bust out not just a chainsaw, but a yellow chainsaw. Because it was supposed to be a wink to Texas Chainsaw. He tries to grind it through, then she finally kicks on the lights. He drops down, and then the chainsaw pulls him on the floor all the way around. Then you see Gizmo. He gets in a car, starts driving around and everything, thinking like he's in the TV show. And eventually, that's when they capture him in the, I guess it was like the garden department. He's trying to put his finger into the water, and then he's like starting to multiply, right? Gizmo comes in, crashes the car, and then jumps on this, I guess you could say like the curtain rod or whatever it is, and opens up all the curtains, and then all of a sudden that's when the sunlight comes in and hits Stripe, and then he starts to melt little by little, falls in the water. Then he comes out of the water and he starts even melting. So basically, Gizmo saved the day, and as that's going on, then his dad, comes in, and the whole time with his dad was like trying to go to this convention, and he went to this convention. It didn't work out because it was like for like really intense inventions and stuff like that. And so he finally gets back into town and follows the dog because the dog was, chasing after Billy's scent. The end of the movie, everybody's all happy and everything. Then the old man comes in and says, here's your money back. You are not ready for a SaWGuY. And as he's taking Gizmo, they're all like, you understand him? They're all like, yeah, it's just, you listen into what you want to hear, right? So Gizmo comes out and says, bye, Billy. And that was the end of the film where you see the old man, walking back, in the snow, with Gizmo, and then that's when you hear like Randall Pelt saying, well, you never know, there might be a gremlin in your house. And the movie ends, and it was a great fucking film. There's so many little winks that Steven Spielberg had did, besides doing Hill Valley and everything like that, because he was going to do Back to the Future after this film, right? So he threw in all these winks, and if you're I guess you could say a nerd like me, you can catch up on all these, like the yellow chainsaws for Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or you see, one of the Gremlins dancing in the bar like Flashdance, It was a pop culture thing. It really was. And the fact that, the dad, when he had went away, it showed that, he was calling the mom and everything, and, he was talking to the mom. Then you see, like, all these other inventors and everything talking on the payphone. You see this big robot. I think that was a robot from Lost in Space, right? But in the corner, you see this guy in a time machine, like the old school time machine, right? And it's like the fans moving and everything. Then it flashes to him talking to the mom and then back to him. And the fucking time machine takes off. I was like, what the fuck? Like, that was the biggest, wink out there. And nobody saw it until after Back to the Future it came out. And then everyone's like, oh, yeah, Spielberg put it in the whole time. And that's what I love about Spielberg back in the day. He used to throw all these little winks in there. And, it made it such a good film that you had to go back and watch these things, And, the only thing that I know a lot of people will argue with me about on the Gremlins is this biggest plot hole of all thing. They can't get wet, but yet they're walking through snow, right? They can't get wet, but they're drinking beer, right? But see, you gotta learn to let go of things like that. It was just like, you have to, you have to open your mind a little bit, I guess you could say, because Yeah, they're walking in snow, but it's ice. And 9 times out of 10, in places that snow, they always throw shitloads of salt. So it's going to, change the dynamic of the water right there. As far as drinking the beer is not all water. It's mixed in with something. And that's what the producers, even the writer came out and said that, Chris Columbus. Which a lot of people don't realize that Chris Columbus and a lot of these other people, they all became famous. Chris Columbus, he's known not only to write Gremlins, but he turned around and did Home Alone 1 and 2, and he did a few other, big cultural films, films that, are still popular. I mean, look him up on IMDb. I was like, damn, he did Home Alone? Okay, that's pretty cool, The father, who played Randall Peltzer, he was actually a big country star, and I guess him and his mom had wrote some songs for Elvis. I was like, wow, okay, this is pretty cool. Then, of course, you have, Phoebe Cates from Fast Times at Ridgemont High. You had Judge Reynold from Fast Times at Ridgemont High. But, I mean, there was all these, different little links that made this film that much better, But originally, this film was supposed to be a lot darker. Some of the scenes, where they fuck with the dog, the Gremlins when they first multiplied, they were supposed to, eat the dog and kill him. But then they said, okay, now we're pushing it more into the R rating. They were supposed to kill Mrs. Deagle, but then they kind of made it more comedic, for family-oriented. But, what was crazy is that Spielberg, he didn't want to direct this. He wanted to make the film, but he wanted to give somebody a shot, which is pretty cool, considering what he had went through. I explained that a lot in Duel. But what I thought was interesting, too, is the fact that they wanted Tim Burton to direct Gremlins. And they were ready to go have Tim Burton, but Steven Spielberg had pulled the plug and said, no, I don't feel comfortable with this. And the reason why is because Tim Burton at the time, he had did Frankenweenie, the short. It was only 15 minutes. And they said, he hasn't done a full feature film yet. I don't know what his chops are. And, I got a lot of time and money and effort invested into this film for Gremlins. And it's kind of shocking and kind of sad at the same time because later on, Tim Burton did, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, and that became a cultural icon in itself, But at the time, he didn't want, Tim Burton to kind of go through with this because he hadn't done a full film. And then, not only that, if Tim Burton would have did it, how different could this film would have been, right? Would have been more kooky. I think it would have been more like Nightmare Before Christmas kind of thing. And I think that's what really stuck out to Tim Burton. He never did a Christmas film because he missed out on that opportunity, which is why I think he turned around and did Nightmare Before Christmas, which, it's kind of cool in its own way. So this film really inspired a lot if you think about it. But let me know in the comments below. I know I'm probably dragging this on over past 30 minutes, but I mean, this is a great fucking film. And like I said, this isn't Christmas unless you talk about, the Gremlins, or if you at least watch it, or if you're crazy like me and watch it 8 times in a week, for an episode. That's what I tend to do sometimes, But hope you all enjoy your Christmas holiday. Well, I can't say Christmas. I mean, I'm going to say Christmas and holidays and every festivities and everything going on. Hope you all enjoy this episode and keep tuning in. Because, next week is already Christmas, right? And I got a fantastic surprise for you. Most of you probably know what it is already, but I'm not going to spoil it. You'll have to check out the announcements, right? But anyways, thank you all for tuning in. Me and Misery, we're going to go and enjoy our holiday festivities, right? So I'll catch y'all next time, as always.